Have you joined the stretch partial revolution?
Because you stretch super deep.
Get that deep stretch aspect.
Well, if you've been listening to Jeff Nippert, I can guarantee you're doing it wrong and probably wasting your time. Yes, they do work. Listen to what Milo says, he knows what he's talking about. So you've seen influencers like Jeff go up to cable machines, put them at that height to give them a harder range of movement in the stretch position, get an excessive stretch on the biceps or whatever muscle group they're targeting, and then curl in that range with a really light weight, right? Yes, you feel your biceps, your shoulders at a massive stretch, your arms, biceps are at a huge stretch in this position, but the reason this is garbage is simple. You have something called the sliding filament theory, right? You've got two types of filament within a muscle fiber. You've got your myosin and your actin. And trust me, there's no need for me reading this off a piece of paper because I do this day in, day out. So you've got your myosin which moves, you've got your actin which doesn't. And the best way to illustrate this is to think about the myosin having little hooks, actin having little loops in it. Your actin's the fiber that stays the same, your myosin's on top of it. There's mid-range, right? Mid-fiber, really good contact between both types of filament. But then what happens when you go into a stretch position, you've got less surface area overlap, so you are significantly weaker. Right? And the same thing in a super contracted position. You are significantly weaker. And let's take, for instance, the people doing the research, like Milo, not that he discusses it in this particular study when they look at triceps going down versus triceps overhead, and overhead is better. But if we look at the ranges they used in the study, it was 90 degrees to 0, shoulder at 180 degrees, 90 degrees to 0. Why did they stop at 90 degrees? That's less of a stretch than if they went to full elbow flexion, right? So full tricep stretch, but they stopped there. Why? Because the researchers, the people doing the study, know sliding filament theory. They understand that if you go past a certain stretch position within the muscle, which is roughly 150% of its relaxed position, you lose out on the benefits of the training in that position. You lose out on strength and a ton of it. So taking your bicep back in a huge stretch, having to lighten the weight, that doesn't work. And all the research looking at stretch partials, all 5 studies, although 4 of them come back positive, right? They all do the same thing. They do not take the stretch to end of range. Let's look at the one with the quads. Where did they work? They worked at 120 degrees of knee flexion at full flexion, at full stretch. 120 degrees is absolutely nothing. You could probably get 145 as a normal person. Right? So they're not even at full stretch on the quads. They're within a normal range of movement. So yes, they're doing these stretch partials in a normal range of movement, and that is the key. So going to these excessive stretches and having to lighten the weight, there's no evidence as of yet. There might be one day, but as of now, there's absolutely no evidence to support any of this. This is utter and it's not going to give you gains. You're going to get more gains going into a normal standing barbell curl, loading the living shit out of it and doing your stretch partials there. Now, before you guys get in the comments say, oh, you're hating on Jeff, saying he doesn't know what he's on about. Jeff knows a lot about training, exercise. Look at his physique, right? He looks absolutely insane, and his channel is one of the best fitness channels on the planet at the moment. His advice is sound. I just think his knowledge of this subject isn't quite there, and he's extrapolated, which means he's pulled data out of thin air, taking it, saying, right, more stretch equals more gains, yet he's taken the stretch the excessive bit, and that is a small mistake and really easy to make if you're not used to interpreting research, right? But Jeff does interpret every other study, every other video I've seen from Jeff has been absolutely bang on, and he knows I think he's made a small mistake here. And in his video where he does a basic interview with Milo, Milo knows exactly what he's talking about, right? Milo discusses strength curves in depth. Now, what a strength curve means is that an area of the exercise is either harder or easier. Usually with a dumbbell or barbell, it's when the movement's at 90 degrees to the ground. With a cable, it's when the movement's at 90 degrees to the cable. With a band, it's when the band's at the most stretched. Right, so Milo really understands strength curves, and what he says is a bench press, your stretch partial is not going to be that much better, that important, because he says basically you're doing the stretch range partials anyway, because when you're at the bottom in the stretch position, right, that's the hardest point of the movement. When you're up the top at lockout, the joints are taking all the force, there's not much on it there, right? But at the bottom there is, so stretch partial is going to be less effective in that range of movement. Where the stretch partial comes in is when the contracted portion is really, really difficult and the stretch portion is really, really easy. Now you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it does, because what Milo says, and what I agree, the research hasn't looked at this, but it's obvious, right? If you're in the stretch portion of the rep and it's easier, and long length partials with the same weight gives you more growth, then we can obviously say, yes, I'm extrapolating a little bit, but if we increase the weight and just do the easy portion, we're gonna get better growth, right? So let's say, for instance, I've only got light weights here today, but let's look at a bent over row, right? This portion of the rep is really, really easy. And this is the stretch portion. Now, I'm not talking about an excessive stretch, standing on a box, really going miles. I'm just talking about a normal Pendlay row, right? That is the easiest portion. This up here, and you can do it yourselves, this up here is the hardest bit. So what Milo says is, utilize that strength curve, put more weight on this bar than you can actually go with, then you can actually finish a full range of movement, and just do the stretch partials with a heavy, heavy weight, strict form, but working in that stretch partial range, still controlling it, rather than going full range of movement. And you can crank the weight to heavier than what you can do a full range of movement with. So you've increased the weight in the stretch position rather than the other way around. Going with a really light weight if you've got no strength there in the super stretch position is not gonna work. But this is gonna work. All right, so next on my list of stupid exercises is, and I've actually said this was a really good exercise when I reviewed Jeff's stuff, because yeah, you feel it a bit. But again, you have to drop the weight so significantly to get into that massive stretch, 90 degrees there. It's really difficult in that stretch portion. But when you're up there in the contracted portion, there's no tension. If we listen to what we said earlier, so we've had to drop the weight because the stretch portion is so difficult, and we're in an excessive stretch, right? This is an excessive stretch, and not only on the deltoid, not only on the lateral deltoid, but also on supraspinatus, which is one of your cuff muscles, which was thought to have the first 10 degrees of movement, which is not the case at all. They all help out, right? But doing this is not going to get you massive shoulders, even with the perfect form, most perfect control, because you can't load it up heavy enough. The research might change, I will say that. Jeff might be onto something, and I think it'll be freaking awesome if someone would do research on going into really stretched positions with light weights and have a look. But for now, at this time in 2024, that's not the case. When we go back to the dumbbells, however, right, so we go to the dumbbells, what is the hardest portion of this range of movement? This is easy, right? The hardest bit is up at the top. So it's the same as the bent over row or most rowing movements. So the idea for this is go heavy, right? And do your stretch partials there under really good control. And no, you don't need to swing it past you, because then gravity is going to be doing the work. And we keep tension on the deltoids by stopping at roughly 10 degrees, right? And then do your stretch partials there. Now, I've only got 10 kilo dumbbells here. I normally do full range of movements with around 10 to 12, depending on when I do them, right? So if I could think, right, if I take 15 kilos, which I don't have the luxury in our gym here to do, I could probably do this with 15 kilos with strict form and good control. So again, upping the weight and using a heavier weight, or at least an equal weight in a stretch partial, is where the benefit lies, not going into a massive stretch and lightening the weight. And guys, it's not only Jeff. Dr. Mike made a video of him lying on a bench in this position, right, going into that excessive stretch with really light weights. And because the stretch portion of the range is so difficult working there, again, if we come up and use a normal incline dumbbell bench, we're in enough of a stretch, right? And we can work there without that excessive stretch. And again, that portion of the rep is not as difficult as at 90 degrees, because that's where the dumbbell. So if we can work from 0 to 90, we can optimize weight and still utilize the stretch or lengthen partial, which is fantastic. And then I saw a video by Eric Janicki. It was a short saying how to grow your delts, and or rear delts, and he was saying don't do the bent over fly. My argument is do the bent over fly. There's exactly the same for the lateral delts, but he goes on to the one that Jeff did, where he's on the pec deck or rear delt machine turning sideways in that massive stretch and doing it there with super light weights. It's a bit of misinformation at the moment. It's not a huge mistake. I think it's just a misinterpretation of the research, what's currently out there. And I do think that long length partials is something really exciting. Right? We look at influencers, they're trying to get young fit people like yourselves, like myself, to build more muscle. Do you know how easy that is? I love it when someone comes in and it's a gym injury or a young person playing football or whatever it is, because building muscle there, it's so easy. It's a breeze. It's like that. You give them the right rehab, right nutrition, right volume, right intensity, done. Try build muscle in a 94-year-old who's just had a hip replacement and has been infected and has been in a wheelchair for 2 months. They've got nothing. So yeah, you think we use stretch partials in clinic based on these 5 studies? I'm telling you now, I'm using them and it's working. It is actually working with dynamometry testing. We are building muscle with long length partials, but not excessive length partials. So the way I'm doing leg stretch partials with my 94-year-olds, going with a really heavy band. Now granted, I could probably straighten this band out, but I've been working from that 120 degree up as far as they can push it and then coming back down. Now I know the strength curve there is not ideal, but because we're reaching the end of their physical range of movement, we're working in that stretch partial, and I'm seeing quicker strength gains in clinic than I was seeing with squats or with a light band doing full range of movement. So this is interesting. So strength actually doesn't get covered in the research. It says it's equal to, but I'm actually seeing faster increases in strength post-injury using stretch partials. So there is such exciting science coming out. Hopefully people are doing, and I hope people like Jeff, I know he was going to do some research, he might still be doing it, will look into an excessive stretch. Because I might have to make another video one day when a paper comes out and say, Jeff was right, an excessive stretch is correct. The answer for now is we don't know, but the true answer is no research is supporting it. It would be like saying, oh, doctor gave me one medication, let me double that, but you end up overdosing. So not ideal for now. All right, if you haven't already watched the video where Jeff interviews Milo, go and watch it. Or if you have watched it, watch it again and listen to what Milo is saying. Milo knows it. Milo is the guy piloting these studies. He's doing a fantastic job, and it's an exciting time in fitness at the moment with these long length partials. There hasn't been something this exciting in fitness research for a long time, let me tell you. So this is brilliant. Listen to what Milo says, learn something from it. I hope you learned something from today's video. If you have, please smash that thumbs up button down below. I'd really appreciate it. And if you made it this far, would you consider smashing that subscribe button for me? If not, go watch some of my other content, and hopefully one of these days I can earn your subscription. Thank you very much for your time, and until then, we'll see you in the next one.